All right, we're here at Song of the Day, coming to you from the Rock Cave as usual. Your host, Mark Pierce. Today is Tuesday, May 12th. I had a few choices for today, to be honest, but so that was fun because I got to try to figure this out. But we're gonna go back to 1981 on this date. On this day, a guy named Michael Lee Addy, or Addy, I'm not sure how he pronounced it, filed for bankruptcy with $1 million in debt. For those of you who don't know who that is, which is probably the majority of you, that would be Meatloaf. And we're going to talk about Meatloaf, and I'm pretty excited about that. And I know there's going to be a lot of detractors out there and a lot of snickering and a lot of eye rolling, but you got to give him a chance. We'll talk about that. So, Meatloaf. Maybe it's his name that was really his biggest detractor. Plus, he clocked in at 300 pounds, but that shouldn't have been a reason for him. But maybe it was his name. But anyway, when did I first hear Meatloaf? Well, the first time I heard Meatloaf ever was when I saw Rocky Horror Picture Show in probably the summer between 8th and 9th grade, or maybe in 8th grade. We went to a midnight showing at Dartmouth College. As kids, we got in and sat in the balcony and then became obsessed with that movie. After that, me and a few of my friends would listen to that soundtrack all the time. And we'll talk about that soundtrack for sure as we get close to Halloween. But for those of you who don't know, he played Eddie in that movie and sang a song or two in there. So that's when I first heard him. And then I didn't know anything about him, didn't hear any other song of his until I was in college. But we'll get to that. So who's Meatloaf? He was born in Texas. He moved to California as a teenager, and right out of high school, he started a band. It was called Meatloaf Soul. And his first gig ever was in Huntington Beach in 1968, and his band was opening for the band Them, which is Van Morrison's first band. And they kind of changed members of the band around, but in that time, they managed to open up for the likes of Taj Mahal, Janis Joplin, The Who, MC5, and the Grateful Dead. So that's pretty cool, right? In early 70s, 72, he joined the LA production of Hair, which he did for a long time, and he kind of revisited it a few years later too, but he was in Hair. He went to Hair on Broadway, and he was also cast in 73 in the Roxy production of Rocky Horror Picture Show, which was the Rocky Horror Show. A lot of the people from those shows were used in the movie. That's how he ended up in the movie. In the play, in the production, he played Eddie and Dr. Scott, the guy in the wheelchair, which is interesting. He had started recording with Jim Steinman around that time that the movie came out, and he convinced the producer of that movie to put a trailer in for Paradise by the Dashboard Light, to put the video in before Rocky Horror Picture Show, which they did. So that helped him kind of launch his career. Bat Out of Hell, they started working on in 1972, kind of kicking it around a little bit. Meatloaf was good friends with John Belushi, and he was actually one of his understudies for a National Lampoon TV show called The Lemmings. And then they got serious about recording it in 74. Everyone knows that Bat Out of Hell album. I mean, was one of the most selling albums of all time. Sold 45 million copies. It still sells around 200,000 copies a year. Huge hit. Ton Rundgren produced it. They opened up for Cheap Trick that year. It's a huge hit. And you look at his videos for that era, and he tended to show up in a tuxedo. So I think that people his whole image, he was called Meatloaf. He's this heavy guy. He's wearing a tuxedo that's kind of rumpled and everything, and kind of looks like a wedding singer at the end of a night. So I think that was kind of worked against him, right? He put out 4 more albums after that, which didn't really go anywhere, although I would argue that the song Midnight and the Lost and Found is a good one. He was fighting with Jim Steinman, who wrote a lot of the songs there. They fought with each other through the 80s. They sued each other back and forth. Jim Steinman had all the rights to Bat Out of Hell. Meatloaf says he made $0 off that album, nothing at all. Jim Steinman also wrote a couple of songs at that time, but he gave them to other artists, and Meatloaf was kind of annoyed by that, and they argue even about that, about whether it was written for Meatloaf or not. But Jim Steinman wrote Total Eclipse of the Heart and gave that to Bonnie Tyler, and he wrote Making Love Out of Nothing at All and gave that to Air Supply. So those were potential Meatloaf songs. It makes you wonder if that would have gone anywhere with them. Then nothing really happens. They kind of just part ways, and then they start getting together again in the early 90s, and they decide to do Bat Out of Hell 2. Released in 92, that was huge. I mean, nobody was really wanted to even pick that up. No one thought it was going to go anywhere. Ended up selling 15 million copies. I Would Do Anything for Love was that huge hit. They won a Grammy for that. That's a great album. And that just really kind of skyrocketed them back into the forefront. I do have a poster over there for the Bat Out of 2 album. Then he puts out Welcome to the Neighborhood after that, which I think I'm maybe the only person that was a fan of that album, just because I'm such a big Meatloaf fan. But that album had a lot of great songs on it. When the Rubber Meets the Road, Not a Dry Eye in the House, just some great songs on that one. So I do like revisiting that album. And then he moves to Connecticut, lives in the Reading area for a good 10 years or so. Coaching softball, that kind of thing. Somewhere along, I forgot to mention his wife, his first wife that he met in the late 70s. They were married for 20 plus years. She had a daughter when they met, and her daughter married Scott Ian, the guitarist for Anthrax. So I thought that was pretty cool. He did file for bankruptcy, like I said. That album was just such a huge album for them. But we talk about the numbers, we talk about the songs. Bat Out of Hell, 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad, Paradise by the Dashboard Lights, I Do Anything for Love, Life is a Lemon, and I Want My Money Back, Rock and Roll Dreams Come True, It Just Won't Quit, Objects in the Mirror Appear Larger Than They Are. From that last album we spoke of, When the Rubber Meets the Road, I'd Lie for You, and That's the Truth, Not a Dry Eye on the House. Now, I love the song Read 'Em and Weep. I don't know if a lot of people know that song, but if you don't, you should check that out. I'll probably post that one. I'll post a couple more in the comments that I really like by him. But rarely when you think about Meatloaf, and for me, you have to go back to the original. You have to go back to Bat, right? How can you not do that? But I'm going to go with You Took the Words Right Out of My Mouth, because I know I've played that before on Song of the Day, but that for me is just a quintessential Meatloaf song. So that's going to be your song of the day. It's Meatloaf. We're serving it up for breakfast today. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll see you on the flip side.